who don't know.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, so I want to show Jamie's American friends and acquaintances and colleagues how he kind of lived the last 13 years of his life. So today, where he would love to have breakfast. He loved the garden. He thought the garden was magical. So I'll take you to a few places, not to the garden, just a few places. So we're walking now to the pond. When Jamie arrived here in 2024, one of the first things he did was help me make this pond waterproof. And the fish that live here are from that time, so they're old fish. And once Jeremy did the waterproofing, it never leaked again. All those years, he did a very good job. He actually even spoke with the National Institute for Concrete in Pretoria about how to do it. So when Jeremy does something, he really does a good job. So now we go to his favorite chair at the front stoop. We had a lot of parties in this.
Betsy Fox needs to mute the audio.
And this is Jamie's chair. So on this chair he would sit and actually talk with the birds. He would speak with the haridas and the doves, and he would count how many times they would, have their sound, and then he would repeat it after them, with adding one more, and then birds would come back with one more, and he would be excited when they would have this duet. So this is forever Jeremy's chair. So I also planted a white rose there next to a pink rose. And now we go to the long house where we do a toast for Jeremy, and then we can start the interactive session.
Yeah, it is locked.
Who locked it? Oh, I got the key. Okay.
Oh, just the gate's locked. Doors are locked.
So this is where we used to have a lot of dinner parties when we needed a big table, and so there I put a photo story of my time with Jeremy at the end of the table. And so we will do our toast to Jeremy, and then we can give the floor to you people. And I have my. So, you want to start? Who wants to start? Or should I go? You start. Okay. So, Jamie had a unique eye. He stunned me with his photos when we walked the beaches of Nature's Valley, South Africa, during our first get-together in May 2012. He made me see the sand, everything around me, in new ways. He told me that he had a dark room as a young child in his parents' home in St. Louis, USA. In later years, I would urge him to take up photography in a serious way. He wasn't interested. That was not where his focus was. Jamie's focus was on with other human beings, animals, and nature. I discovered people late in life, he once said to me. When I asked him what was there before people, he said frequencies. And indeed, he rather looked for frequencies on the car radio than listening to music. He would be delighted when he would find the unexpected. On our drive through Botswana, en route to Namibia in 2014, he found Radio Dakar, broadcasting from Senegal in West Africa, blasting American country music whilst we were looking at zebras crossing. It was apparently an America-supported radio station. Frequencies and people, it became a life, a career, and a calling in community radio and TV that took him all over America and to such places as Nicaragua. Jeremy's creative genius, technical wizardry, legal acuity, generosity, hands-on approach helped shape community broadcasting culture. He was a man with a mission, collaborated with many people, and accomplished many things. I trust that many of those are present here and will share their memories and anecdotes. Two men stand out for me, Lorenzo Milam and Michael Cousin. The latter I had the pleasure to meet, and I know that both will come up in the anecdotes that will be shared. I want to mention three great women. Together with Cammy Enslow, Jeremy started KDNA in St. Louis, Missouri. He started KFAT in Gilroy, California with Laura Ellen Hopper, and together they had a daughter, Elsbeth. He started KYES, an independent commercial TV station in Anchorage, Alaska, and he married her in a balloon. KYES, by the way, was the first Alaskan TV station to turn digital in August 2003, 18 months before other TV stations in Alaska. Jamie's legacy is alive in many of the people gathering here today and through all of you in many others that are not present and may not even be known to us. Jamie's life is a wonderful living work of art. Sorry. I'm Jamie's last life partner. Jamie found me when he was ready to embark on his last big adventure. Sorry. To Jamie. Discovering who he was beyond his identity as the radio and TV broadcasting tech genius and guru. He opened himself up to new experiences, such as sleeping in a tree in a dry riverbed in the African bush, whilst baboons were screaming around us. Sleeping on the ground in the game park next to the fence where the lions roam. He could dance with rhythm to African music he had never heard before. When he noticed the improvised electrical wiring in an informal settlement, he got out of the car, approached the amateur electricians and told them that ESCOM should train them and give them a job, because they're obviously. And when there were political protests that had gone violent and were even reported on the front page of the Washington Post, Jeremy actually drove around to check out what was happening. They all waved at me, he reported back. Jeremy was totally fearless in a natural, unassuming way, and this was part of his magic. Jeremy was keenly aware of the cognitive and physical decline caused by dysplasia, but he never expressed self-pity or despondency. As the disease started to degrade his brain and his body, his personality subsided and his spirit started to shine through more clearly. He became very kind and loving, but he kept his sharp wit, the twinkle in his eyes, and his funny wordplay games. His lightheartedness, fearlessness, and generosity came from deep within his being, and no disease could take that away from who he was. Jeremy refused to consider spiritual perspectives that were not acceptable to an educated, atheistic Western mind. Prove it, he would say, when I dare to challenge his, dare I say it, limited understandings. His hesitance to accept the spiritual dimension of who we are as human beings run deep. In June 2018, Jeremy had a near-death experience, an NDE. He never tired telling our friends that he came back because of me. I knew that. I was lying next to him on our bedroom floor, urging him to fight and come back to me. His was a typical textbook NDE. There was the white room, the tunnel, the people familiar to him that gave him the choice of walking through the tunnel or turning back to life on Earth. And then there was his profound behavior change afterwards, which we, his friends and I, never tired reminding him of. He had become so much more kind and loving after his NDE. Yet at the end of his life, nearly 7 years later, Jeremy proudly told me that he had found the explanations for his NDE. There was a chemical in his brain that had the function to make him feel good whilst he was dying. It was just hallucination after all. I am exceedingly glad that he knows better now. Freed of his ailing body and brain, Jeremy is now able to explore frequencies in ways we, cast in our physical human bodies, cannot even begin to imagine. I want to end my tribute with a toast of gratitude to this loving, truthful, gifted, rebellious, light-hearted, and generous spirit that was Jeremy David Lansman. Sorry, my beautiful man. Thank you, Jeremy, for all that you were to me. There is too much to mention. The memories are still flooding me. My cup runneth over. I'm grateful that we had the time and the space to build a beautiful, simple life together where we both had the freedom to evolve into more of ourselves, in truth and in love, just as we had promised each other on our wedding day. Thank you for this magical place, you would often say, even in your last days. Jeremy, so much of that magic was you. It still is. Let your magic unfold into the unknown, and please keep me in touch with what you're up to. Thank you. Who wants to go next? Okay. Paul, we can give it back to you now for the online people.
All right, thank you. That was very moving, very emotional moment. Thank you so much, and thank you for allowing all of us into your home and your beautiful longhouse there. It's a very warm, wonderful place, and I see you all are doing a toast now, and we'll join you in our toast. I've got something right here. If anybody else has something, we can all do a toast together right now. Very beautiful indeed, says Kathy Manell in Cape Town. And so now, anybody who wants to speak, please raise your Zoom hand. I think I instructed everybody how to do that. And cheers to Jeremy Lansman, a great pioneer of community radio. But let me get back into the mode where I can see the hands here.
Jeremy.
To the life that never ends.
Yeah.
Yes, that's part, the liveness that never ends. Right.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you.
We're
Thank
missing you in the physical form.
And thank you all.
All right. I would like to, who would like to speak next? Let's see, does anybody have their hand raised? I'm going to turn it over to Bob Nagy in Hot Springs, Arkansas. Bob, you tell us a little bit about the community radio landscape.
Well, I don't have anything planned here, but this is amazing what we're able to do with Zoom here. And I'm sure they have I guess a telephone there on the table.
Good.
For all of us who have been involved in community radio, and especially Jim Ellinger, who's on the frequency here, and spreading community radio, like with Jeremy around the world. And I feel like we're part of this smaller group now of people who are still doing these things and still passionate about the magic of radio. Like I've always said, 200 years ago, they'd have thrown you down the well, but now everyone takes it for granted, but we don't. We still feel like this is magic. And as Gaia just bounces our signals around the way she will on any given day, we still find great magic in this medium. And especially its ability to let people communicate with other actual human beings that are not, necessarily an AI being or somebody who isn't who they seem to be. So we enjoy this, and still promulgate this magic, and we will continue to do it for whatever time we've got left. But Jeremy, a complex and interesting individual, and certainly one of the big names in pioneering the things that we're passionate about. So here's to you. I made us a little bit of Red Bush South African tea this morning, and rooibos. Love it. And makes me want to move to South Africa right about now. So tip of the hat to Jeremy and everybody on frequency here today.
Am I here? Hello. Yeah, hello, everyone. Jim Ellinger here, also in Austin, Texas, in occupied Texas. I am one of those folks. I am one of those folks who continue to listen to the radio, work in radio, and put radio stations on the air. In the legacy of Jeremy Lansman, we are about to put another radio station on the air here in just a month or two in the little town of Kyle, Texas. Actually, one of the fastest growing cities in the nation, just south of Austin. We're going to put KKYL 94.1 FM on the air, thundering across the airwaves at a whopping 68 watts. Just powerful stuff. I grew up in St. Louis and had an early infatuation with radio, and remember reading in the paper, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, that there had been a radio station taken over by a motorcycle gang. And they had a short story, kind of a filler story, and that in fact was KDNA. And I think they had a quote from Jeremy, and I tuned in on my radio, and at the age of 9 or 10, I have to say I didn't quite understand what I was listening to. I occasionally crossed paths with Jeremy through the National Federation of Community Broadcasters, at MARC, the World Association of Community Radio Broadcasters. He was always held in high regard. I have my autographed copy of Lorenzo Milam's Sex and Broadcasting. I frequently take that to conferences and hold it up, and people are like, there you go. I hold it up, and people are like, why do you have that book about sex? I said, well, you'd have to talk to Mr. Milam about that. But of all the characters that came out of Austin, Texas, and America during that era, Jeremy Lansman and Lorenzo Milam remain at the very pinnacle of outrageousness. Jeremy Lansman is probably most well known for the Petition Against God. And I have my autographed copy here. I can't find it on the shelf. They said, arguably half serious, supposedly after a night of drinking, that the separation of church and state, part of the Constitution, that religious broadcasters may not and cannot broadcast on the radio. Flat out, take them off the air. And they had the audacity, the very balls, if you will, to file that petition with the FCC. And it, as the legend goes, generated tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of responses from the far-right religious community. Decades later, somebody would write about it in a local right-wing or Christian publication, and it would generate a whole new wave of complaints that the FCC dutifully I suppose, read and saved. Nothing, of course, ever became of it. It was just a joke, if you will. The Petition Against God, I recently posted to an to an LPFM chat website. A religious broadcaster was being a bit of a butthead and was asking for advice while being kind of not very nice. So I said, well, sir, you need to get a copy of the Lorenzo Milam and Jeremy Lansman petition. That'll be very helpful for you. And a day or two later, he came back and he was quite put out with me. One of the great characters, I should also mention Jeff Nightbird, who helped start some LPTVs and LOPO, the low power group out of Boulder, Colorado. These were some real funsters, some real jokesters of that era who took glee in poking it to the man. Lorenzo Milam passed about 5 years ago. I think quite a few of us here on this list were on his at his virtual memorial. Jeremy Lansman will not be replaced. He will be terribly missed. He was a remarkable and irascible fellow. At least down here in the Austin airwaves, we miss Jeremy Lansman. Thank you.
All right, who else would like to speak? And I see somebody raise their hand. All right, Tim Pozar with KPFA in Mill Valley, California. Go for it, Tim.
Hi. Let's see. I'm going to have to. Thanks, Paul, for meeting. Yeah. I think the first time I sort of ran into him, well, actually, through Sex and Broadcasting. We started I was working in high school, or he was in high school. We tried to start a little community radio station, was unsuccessful. I worked with a number of other folks and possibly some people here to help start KFCF to rebroadcast KPFA. And a lot of the inspiration came from, again, knowing Jeremy. Before we started it was about the same time we started KFCF to rebroadcast in Fresno, because it's pretty red. We wanted something that was a little more blue in that area. I was a big fan of KFAT, and I drove out there sort of on my own from Fresno. And I remember talking to Jeremy. He said, "Oh yeah, come on over." And I told him I was a broadcast engineer and such. And I remember walking up the stairs to the second floor, and literally right across the top of the stairs was this kind of Beverly Hillbillies sort of dog. It was this hound dog that it was not moving. I had to step over it. And then Jeremy welcomed me in, and Laura and such. And Jeremy just took me on this wonderful sort of like engineering tour of the studios, where he was using cassette decks as cart machines, and he had a problem with the STL transmitter because it would vary frequency, and so he had a 100-watt light bulb that would sit underneath the transmitter and turn on and off to try to keep the temperature regulated so it wouldn't drift frequency. And all these really sort of like hacks. The telephone, you should hear about the telephone story sometime, or ask somebody about how he was hijacking or extending the telephone lines from San Jose to Gilroy. He got busted by the FCC for that one. All these sort of wonderful things that I remember after we started KFCF, I said, well, we've got to get this station in Fresno somehow. And so we started talking to him about putting a translator in Fresno. And I remember him driving out, and we were sitting around the house, and so he looked out and he says, "Is that a pool?" And he said, "Do you mind if I go for a swim?" And I said, no. He completely strips down to, bare essentials, and had nothing on, goes running in, dives into the pool, swims around for a while, and gets out. And it's like, wow, okay, this guy has no boundaries. It was just wonderful. I continued my relationship with Jeremy and continued starting radio stations basically because Jeremy and Lorenzo inspired me. They were the Johnny Appleseeds of the community radio. And I'm so indebted to Jeremy. He was a little hyper, but he was great. He was just wonderful just to sort of talk to. And the times that he was out when Addie Gibbons and would have a party of nerds in Oakland, and Jeremy would be there, and it gave me a chance to be able to sort of catch up with him. I so miss him. I miss Lorenzo too. There was many times that I got a chance to talk to him and read all of his books. So if people don't have it, go out and get Sex in Broadcasting. If not for the historical, sort of information in it and such, but getting an idea of these two radical folks going out there and starting the most creative, wonderful radio stations. Thanks, Jim, for showing it there. I'll leave it to that.
Can I see a hand of somebody else who'd like to speak? Anybody? So I'm looking around, looking for, there we go, Michael August. You go ahead and take it, Michael.
Can you hear me now? Does everybody hear me okay?
We can.
Okay.
We can.
Okay, good. My path crossed with Jeremy's over the years since my starting community radio at KPFT in Houston. But it's kind of funny when you think about a person that you've known in and out of your life for a while. I think the last time I talked to him was about 10 years ago. We had a wonderful phone conversation. But one of the things I really remember about Jeremy that kind of impressed me is the man loved horseradish more than anybody I ever knew. And we used to go out to lunch occasionally at this place that had bratwurst in Boulder. And he would put so much horseradish on his brat and eat it. Tears would be pouring out of his eyes. And, so it made me want to try that too. So ironically, all the great things that the guy did for community radio and even helping John Schwartz launch KBDI back in the 80s. The thing that I remember and kind of love, the human thing that I remember and love about him most was that love of horseradish. That's all.
And around for another raised hand of somebody who'd like to talk about, there we go, with Tharwa, excuse me if I'm mispronouncing, El Kholi in Cairo, Egypt. Go ahead and pick it up, Tharwa, unmute yourself.
We can't hear you, Thawa. You need to unmute. It's on the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, the little microphone you need to click. Unless you can do it, Paul, maybe.
She has to do it herself. I've sent her a message saying, asked to unmute. Thor, we can't hear you. Go down to the left-hand side of the screen and unmute yourself. There's a little audio button there.
Red bar across the
The
microphone.
little red microphone button next to your first name. You have to click on that to unmute. So click on the little red microphone button to unmute. Is there anyone else? We'll come back to you. Anybody else? Let's see another raised hand.
I see Judith.
Judith. Is Judith here?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, go ahead.
I turned off my video because there's low bandwidth and there are a lot of people subscribing. Jeremy was one of my closest living relatives. I only had two first cousins, Jeremy and his younger brother, Joel, who died 20 years ago. Joel had lifelong disabilities. And yeah, my first memories of Jeremy, I was about 2.5 and my mother was expecting a baby, and our little family, me and my dad, who was Jeremy's mother's brother had just moved into a house on the outskirts of Hollywood. And Jeremy had already pretty much decided that high school was not for him. And the only thing that really interested him was radio broadcasting and some of the science around that. So at that point, you actually had to go to the FCC headquarters to get a first class operator's license. And he was 16 years old. I hope you guys can still hear me. Is everything going okay? Can you hear me?
You're doing good,
Yeah,
Judith.
we hear you.
Okay.
Judith,
Yes.
you're doing
Sorry,
very good.
Okay, excellent, because I've had a little bit of fuzz here. Anyway, so my main memories of those days, it was like this playful big brother that somehow I'd always wanted without knowing I wanted it had just arrived. And the thing I remember, you know, this is the late 1950s. And we had one of those, we now call it mid-century modern. They were a type of swing chair that was common at the time. It's a big iron ring and covered with canvas and suspended by 4 ropes so that you could swing in it. Well, Jeremy discovered that you could also swing, but it would spin. I love to spin, and I still do. And I remember my little flat, slightly oddly shaped feet running through the house, chasing him to try to get me to put me on the swing and spinning it and saying, "Faster, Jeremy, faster!" You know, I remember it as a really happy time. There's a lot of weird family stuff that I won't go into, but we all know that dysfunctional family is a little bit of a redundancy. There's always something that happens. There were a lot of difficult things, but Jeremy was always this. He was just sort of this figure in my life. He was my connection to our grandmother and our step grandfather. Our real grandfather on that side had died when both of his children were minors. So he didn't know his grandchildren. 3 out of the 4 of us are all named after him. His name was Jerome, and we're Jeremy, Joel, and Judith. And I've got a younger brother named Michael, named after his great grandfather on the other side. Jeremy and I had a lot in common. We looked enough alike so that we were sometimes mistaken for brother and sister when we were seen in public together. We were both kind of introverted in a family that also has a lot of extroverts in it, especially our mothers. We both kind of had to find our own ways. I have written the story up about hitchhiking to see Jeremy when I was 20 years old, working as a mental health counselor in Berkeley. And he was in Los Gatos. His daughter Elspeth was about 2 years old. And we went up to visit some friends of his in Felton and the Santa Cruz Mountains. And I'd been working and I was tired. And, you know, I met everyone. They kept forgetting my name and calling me first cousin, which was fine with me. And I just laid down on a couch in the living room and took a nap there. And I later found out that that was also considered a very Jeremy thing to do. He had no inhibition about it. If he was tired, he just laid down and slept no matter where he was. So there's a lot more I can say, but Jeremy and I kind of reestablished this family connection later in life, for which I'm very grateful. I was with him when his mother died at home in Santa Cruz 24 years ago. And Jeremy would just say, "Judith, I'm really glad you're here." And I felt it. So that's who I am in this story. And I'll shut up here.
Very good. Thank you, Judith. Judith's Elizabeth Gibbs, Jeremy's mother, and I lived on a school bus in Winters, California at one point. And we're getting some feedback here. Let me see. Somebody's got an open mic. Who has the open mic here? Anyway, I'm getting ready to turn it over to Bill Thomas here in a minute. but I knew Jeremy from high school. We were in competing high schools in St. Louis. He was at Clayton High and I was at Bayless High, and we were rivals. And I grew up in St. Louis with Jeremy. And then later on, when he started KDNA, I met up with his mom and Jeremy during the early years of KDNA. And then over the last 4 weeks to 5 weeks I had of Jeremy's life, we had a pretty intense conversation on Facebook. So there were the 3 points of intersection I had with him during my lifetime. And now I'm going to turn it over to a guy in Fargo, North Dakota named Bill Thomas. So Bill, I'm going to let you pick it up there. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everybody. Some old friends on here. And I first met Jeremy in 1968 when I showed up to volunteer at KDNA in St. Louis. And I found him to be, I think the best word is inspirational. That he showed me, I was younger than him by a few years, what could be done, what was possible, how you could, I mean, he was smart, he was energetic, he was active, and he loved to see things happen and hear things go on around him. And he enabled others so much to do that. Jim mentioned seeing the story in the newspaper about the motorcycle gang taking over KDNA. I was there. I was one of the 2 people there in the station when the motorcycle gang showed up. And one of the things that I remember about that is people were listening on the radio and I was on the air. I was like talking and I was kind of trying to convey that a motorcycle gang had taken over the station, and without alerting the motorcycle gang that I was doing that. And I got a call from a listener who said, like, I've called the police and they're going to come over. And the police showed up and the motorcycle guy went out to them and said, oh, there were some black guys here bothering us, but they left and everything's okay. And the police just drove off. And what finally happened is I got a call from another motorcycle gang. And that motorcycle gang guy told me on the phone, we like you, and we don't think these guys should be messing with you this way. Tell them we're coming over there. They better get out of there. And they took off like a shot after the call from the Bone Shakers came in. And that said a lot to me about the way that KDNA connected to so many different parts of the community as a community radio station. It wasn't just the scholarly folk sing people. It wasn't just the left-wing radicals. It wasn't just the libertarians and the avant-garde music people and the jazz people and the ethnic music people and the historians and poets. It was the motorcycle gangs too, connected to KDNA. So that really struck me as emblematic of the kind of connections, the wide-ranging and freewheeling connections that Jeremy made and the way he got stuff done that was so inspirational to me. So I pass that story along in appreciation of Jeremy's spirit that inspired me and certainly affected the course of my whole life as I ended up, after volunteering at KDNA, sending my life off into non-commercial radio, which I have stayed with for all these years. I also wanted to get on to talk, though, to just say that Tom Thomas and Terry Clifford are, Tom is my brother and Terry's my sister-in-law, are trying to get on to this Zoom call. They haven't been able to get on. And Tom and Terry shared an apartment with Jeremy and Laura in St. Louis that was a workshop for community radio. So many different community radio wannabes came there, connected, put together their FCC applications, put together grant applications, got financial support to enable them to qualify for an FCC license. And they worked together so much and had such a good relation and had such an impact, the four of them, on community radio. And so I'm really sorry that Tom and Terry cannot get on. I'm sure they'll be watching the recording of this, and wanted to acknowledge that they had a major connection with Jeremy that led to a lot of things happening. And with that, I will mute and let somebody else talk.
All right, so we've got two people with raised hands, and so I think Charles Reich was next. And Charles, where are you located? Oh, you need to unmute yourself. Still got to unmute.
Yeah.
All right, so where are you located?
Seattle.
All right, so go ahead and you pick up the ball, and we'll hear your story about Jeremy.
Okay. In 1968, 1964, I was in junior high school. And well, before the incident I'm going to be describing, a few months before it, I had discovered KRAB in Seattle. KRAB went on the air in 62 is when its first year really started. But it had been around for a while. I had built a kit radio to listen to FM, not knowing what I'd find on it, and found KRAB. Very strange sounds to be coming out of the radio. So in junior high school, there I got an assignment as well. Actually, all the students in the class got an assignment to recite a poem. I had heard a program of poetry on KRAB that appealed to me, and I called the station. I mean, it was a poem by a German poet, Paul Celan. I searched for it in the local library, couldn't find anything by him there. And so ended up contacting KRAB, asking if they still had a copy of the tape. They did, and invited me to come down to the station and they would make me a dub. So I lived outside of Seattle, but took the bus into it. Found myself in this, it was the first radio station that I ever walked into. It wasn't really what I expected, but it was very comfortable. I was greeted by Jeremy Lansman. I explained to Jeremy what I was after, and he said he'd make a copy for me. So he rushed around the studio, if you can call it that. KRAB had really 3 rooms to it. The control room, a room the transmitter sat in, and the so-called main studio, which also served as the business office and tape and record library, and the place where one went to try to warm up occasionally. So he made me my tape and charged me $5, which seemed like a fair price, and I went on my way. So that was when I met Jeremy. While I was there, he not only made my dub, but told me about all the opportunities I could have to volunteer, and which meant I ranged from folding and stuffing program guides to taking out the garbage and whatever other little tasks he or Lorenzo might send in my direction. But, what he did was persuade me that it wouldn't be difficult to volunteer at the station. So I did eventually. And it pretty much sort of set a path for my life that it was kind of inexplicable, but took me to lots of different things that I never would have experienced had it not been for Jeremy. So that's outside of watching Jeremy climb up the tower occasionally. That's my Jeremy story.
Thank you, Charles. That's great. And
Thank
now
you.
we're going to turn it over to Bill Thomas in Fargo, North Dakota.
Oh, you did me already. Pick somebody else.
All right, lower your hand then. Lower your hand. And we're going to go to Bennett. Where are you located, Bennett?
San Marcos, Texas.
Oh, right in our neighborhood in Austin. All right.
Where I
and
escaped,
what's your affiliation?
Where I escaped after 40 years of covering the FCC in Washington, D.C. So I'm still involved in radio here. My story parallels much of what you've already heard. I was aware of Jeremy and Lorenzo from books of Lorenzo's that someone had loaned me while I was a student at University of Texas in radio and TV. I never imagined that I would meet these gentlemen, much less become their employee. But I did meet Jeremy on a rooftop in Boulder, Colorado, where I was curious and followed a bunch of guys who were carrying antennas up to the roof of my dorm building when I was in graduate school at University of Colorado. They put me to work there, helping them to install a translator for KBDI in Denver. And after that was done, I asked the name, I introduced myself, asked the name of the guy who was had put me to work there, and it was Jeremy. So it was pretty astounding. He gave me a job working for the company he had in Boulder called, at the time it was called ATD, later Low Power Technology, a company he had started with Lorenzo and with Jeff Nightbird, who was had been a well-known publisher. And in fact, his previous job before getting into broadcast engineering, Jeff was editor of Hustler magazine, working for Larry Flint. So what a colorful career he had. It was through working with Jeremy on numerous FCC applications that really set the path for me for my career. Longtime involvement with the commission as a trade journalist, as a consultant. I'm still following the FCC for my newsletter called Experimental Radio News. In the 90s, I was at the FCC. I spent a lot of time there, and one day Jeremy showed up. Some of you have heard this story. He was doing some research there at the commission, and I brought him to the room where the FCC employees answer calls and letters from the public. And I asked them, now this is in the 90s. This is like 20 years after the Petition Against God had been turned down. And I asked them, do you still get complaints about the Petition Against God, the Lansman Milam petition? And they exclaimed that they were getting complaints every day. And they showed us a log of these messages from the public of people still demanding that the commission turn down this demonic petition. So I said, well, that's Lansman. So we all had a good laugh, and he wasn't arrested, and that is my Jeremy Lansman story. He was a decent, a fair boss, a tremendously resourceful person, wonderful person to work with, and perhaps unlike Jeremy when he was here, perhaps somewhat like Iniki, I do believe that human consciousness survives death of the body. And so I think it's quite likely that after we're liberated from this place, we may indeed encounter our dear friend again, and that will be a joyous occasion.
Yes, it sure would. It would be a very joyous occasion. And Carol Schatz in New York City has her hand raised, and Carol, pick it up.
Okay. Hi to so many of you that I haven't seen for many years. You know, for someone who had so little formal education, Jeremy was probably one of the most well-read people that I know. He had such a range of interests, not just, of course, he was self-taught with physics and engineering, but he really, I mean, his bookshelf was just filled with just such a wide range of reading. And he was also really a natural teacher. And anyone who asked him a question got the most extensive explanation, often far more than they had anticipated, but he loved doing that. Jeremy constructed, you know, we own, for those of you who don't know, KYES-TV together, and he constructed the station in a very unconventional way, really because we didn't have the money. And so he did the rebuilding of the transmitter, and he built the antenna, and he did all these things himself. But it also meant that he couldn't really get anyone else to handle some of the technical things. So because they didn't know how he had put it together. So for many years, the station signed on in 1990, but it was years later before we got a new transmitter. Over the years, the transmitter, which was on top of a mountain in about 30 miles north of Anchorage, and if the power went down, which happens sometimes, of course, with the harshest winds in the middle of winter, the transmitter would call, and he had remote access on his phone, but occasionally he couldn't get the power back on. And so in the middle of the night, he would get in the car, drive the 30+ miles to the transmitter site. Sometimes he'd have to walk the final part to get to the transmitter building because it hadn't been plowed yet. And, you know, it was something that transmitter was just such a part of our life and a disruptive part of our life. And it was a burden for him, but he just did it. And including when we were traveling, there were times when he thought he might have to go back to Anchorage because he couldn't get the transmitter to respond. Many in the broadcast community in Anchorage really admired Jeremy, his ingenuity and his resourcefulness. A few were a little less respectful, but Jeremy never put anybody down, and accepted whatever it was that they reacted to. Jeremy also designed the automation system at KYES, shifting the capturing of playback, the capturing of programming and the playback to computer, and that was a significant milestone for the station, and it gave the operations staff a lot of pride, and that we were one of the first to be automated in Anchorage. No matter how busy Jeremy was with his own stations, he always seemed to have time for someone, many of you on this Zoom, who were working on their own projects. And he thrived overcoming technical challenges and really enjoyed the camaraderie of working on your projects as much of his. He was dedicated to making a difference through his own broadcast means, as well as in helping others achieve their goals. I want you to know that, just to put some perspective on this, Jeremy and I were basically separated, though living in the same house, when he left for South Africa in 2012. It was the station that brought us together. It was also what took us apart. But over the years, I considered us friends with a shared history, but no ill will. That he spent his final years surrounded by the love of Inigo was well-deserved. And reading the long list of accomplishments and the impact he had on so many is assurance that his memory will live on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rosa. And now on to Rosa Ramon, who is with KDNA in St. Louis. Where are you located, Rosa? And you're gonna have to unmute yourself. I think you're unmuted. Okay, there you go.
Unmuted.
All right, take it up. Pick it up.
I'm in Seattle, and yes, I was with KDNA, but not in St. Louis. I was with KDNA in Eastern Washington, in Granger. It was the first Spanish language educational radio station to go on the air in the United States. And so I never met Jeremy personally, but in 1979, I wrote to him asking for permission to use KDNA as our call letters for Radio Cadena. And it's the relationship also continues with the fact that KRAB in Seattle, which was also Jeremy and Lorenzo's station, was very involved in the creation of Radio KBOO. So I just wanted to mention to Jeremy's wife that his legacy continues. And in another generation, future generations, Radio Cadena has been on the air for 40 years, and it continues to be on the air. And last year, it was selected as one of the BBC's 4 radio stations featured for World Radio Day. So just wanted to say thank you to all of the founders of early community radio. Know that the benefits of it continue tremendously to this day. And that's my thank you.
Thank you very much, Rosa. Appreciate it. And Tharwa has her hand raised, and let's see if we can get unmuted there, Tharwa, and get you on here. Go ahead.
Okay, I would like just to mention that I have known Jeremy because of knowing ENICA for a scientific project for women empowerment. I have met with him in 2012 while he visited Egypt, Cairo, for his mission in radio technique. And I was only able to meet him for 2 days only. And this 2 days was full of love and full of friendship with him, because he seems that he is a very good person. I met with him one day for enjoyment, all things in Cairo, Egypt, and have dinner and staying, enjoying nature and weather and everything. And the second day, I have mentioned in my recording video, we went to a traditional place for just recognizing the traditions of Egypt. And he was able to buy some items for traditional clothes, and with a big hat, red hat, put on his head, and special robe and stick in his hand. And he was able to dance with the people there in this place. I feel like this man loved life very much, and very simple in his performance with me and with my colleague. So I remember him very well. After he left for those 2 days, he leave an impression in my head, and he keep contacting me all the time while he was talking about disease or anything related to his health. I was answering him, and he keep talking to me, and keep the relation until he passed away. So I loved this man because he is a husband for a very nice lady. We know her in our career and for teaching us everything about women empowerment. And in this case, our traditional and aspects and our religion impose us to raise hand for God to say, may peace upon his soul. I will keep remembering him because he was a so nice man. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tharwa, if you could lower your hand now, I'd appreciate it. And I'm going to toss it over to John Schwartz to pick it up. Where are you located, John?
I'm in my basement in Boulder, Colorado.
All right, go ahead.
Well, you know, Jeremy and I started KBDI-TV here in the Denver, Colorado area. And I'm a little worried that I will go on for hours. Feel free to shut me up if I really talk too much. The media environment at that time was really different than it is today. There were only 5 television stations on the air in Denver. There wasn't cable TV, no satellites. Really, the internet was more of a scientific experiment. So getting a VHF TV license in a relatively large city like this was kind of a big deal. And the existing public television stations seriously did not want us to do this and tried a lot to get our FCC authorization revoked. So this was a struggle. And, you know, I still remember the closeness that came out of doing something that was so much opposed and so difficult. Of course, the station was made out of junk and it was run by Jeremy. We got 2 television transmitters that were about 25 years old. They weighed 20,000 pounds. They had hundreds, maybe thousands of tubes in them. There was nothing solid state in them at all. And Jeremy, everybody called it Jeremy rigging. Jeremy made them work, not very reliably, but he did. And a lot of the other stuff that we had was junk too. But the effect of this was to give a valuable, rare television frequency to a set of people who you would never think would have that, you know, kind of access to the public mind. And if you think about it, that's really what happened in radio too. Jeremy helped so many stations get on the air and helped so many people get a voice that they never would have had. Jeremy donated a sizable personal fortune to starting KBDI-TV. He was a very vital man. It's hard for me, even though it's been many years, to think of him as dead because he had such energy and such magnetism. And I am so indebted to him for all the things that he did. You know, if you think of Jeremy, there's a little bit of Karl Marx, there's a little bit of prairie populism, but, you know, the voice that I hear is Mark Twain, the iconoclasm, the willingness to twit the establishment, certainly to defy and annoy religious authorities. All of these are characteristic of him and his life. But I miss him, and I'm very sorry that he's died.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. From Boulder, Colorado. And is Barry in here? She's having trouble finding the raised hand icon, so I'm going to call on her next if Barry's in here. Are you in here, Barry?
I'm in. Anyway, how am I getting feedback? I think it's because my phone is on. So anyway, why am I getting feedback? Oh, okay. I'm going to take you off a speaker for a minute, Addie. Hi, this is my tribute to Jeremy. I mean, to me, he was like I don't know, I want to say MacGyver, but I don't want to insult how brilliant he truly was by saying MacGyver, but he truly was so brilliant. I admired that so much. I met Jeremy through Addie Gevins and Michael Cousins, and I was one of the people at those, nerd parties, even the pre-nerd parties. I always found Jeremy easy to talk to. I thought he might be, in another world and very difficult, but he was so easy to talk to and was just a regular to me, sort of a down-home person. You could just, chat with him about almost anything and had a clever sense of humor. So the reason why I wanted to show you my phone is Addie Gevins was trying to get in on the Zoom and was having trouble. So this was my Jeremy-like solution, was put my telephone with the speaker on next to my laptop speaker so she could hear the proceedings. So she's been on for a long time listening to this tribute for Jeremy. She loved him. He would stay with her house, and I'm going to try to let her just say at least a hi because it'll sound terrible. But I want to give my special heartfelt appreciation and sympathies to Ineki, and thank you for having this Zoom. And it's wonderful seeing so many people on the call on this Zoom presentation that I know from over the years. It's just wonderful that we're all here together to celebrate the contribution of someone who was and still remains to be so very important. So Addie, at least say hi.
Yeah, hello, all of you. Love you so much. Wonderful you doing this, and yeah, I don't want to just make a lot of noise, static noise. So I don't know if that's working.
Okay.
But oh well. Oh well. Anyway, love you all.
Okay. Thanks, Addie.
Thank you, Barry.
Anyway, that's it for me.
Thank you, Addie. Addie is a mover and shaker in program content for non-commercial radio, and you can find her link in the chat, and that's from Tim Pozar. And I'm going to turn it over to Susie McClear right now because she has her hand raised. So Susie, go ahead and pick it up.
Well, actually, this is Rich, because my computer wasn't working. We're on a ship off the coast of Chile trying to use a satellite link, which I think is kind of appropriate working with Jeremy. We built KAXE in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. It's 50 years ago now, and KCAW in Sitka, Alaska. And when Bill talked about people going to the apartment that Jeremy and Tom Thomas and Terry Clifford and Laura shared, Susie and I were two of those folks that did it. We went down to St. Louis. We drove down from northern Minnesota, and we sat there. During the day, Tom showed us how to go through the FCC application stuff. But at night, Jeremy was the inspiration. I remember talking with Jeremy, and he spun an idea by me. I don't know whether Jeremy actually ever did it or not, but it sounded like a brilliant idea, and I realized I want to be in on this type of stuff. The idea was he had a Volkswagen microbus, and he was going to drive around picking up the image frequencies off of people's FM radios and find out who was listening to KDNA, who was not a member, and then call them out on the air saying, hey, you people, give the address. We're listening, but you're not contributing to this station. I thought that was absolutely brilliant. And he and I sat and laughed most of the evening talking about that and other screwball ideas that we could use to kind of raise money. Jeremy and Tom and Terry were some of the first people that really took us seriously. We were trying to build a radio station in very rural northern Minnesota. CPB said, quote, we're here to build stations that serve people, not gophers. Jeremy and Tom both took us seriously, and because of that, we were able to get the station on the air. I just wanted to say thank you, Jeremy, and thank you for giving me the inspiration of the whole idea of driving around in a VW microbus, picking up image frequencies off of people's FM radios and calling them out for not becoming a contributor to the station. Thank you, Jeremy.
All right, thank you. You're not Susie McClure. Thank you. I appreciate it. All right, who's up next? Who would like to say something next? Or I think we're pretty much at a wrap here, unless somebody else has something to say. And Mike Alaska is raising his hand, and so I'm going to toss it over to you, Mike. You can pick it up.
There we go. Well, it's been inspirational to listen. You know, I met Jeremy in the 1980s when I had a roommate who said I got this job selling ads for a music television station in Anchorage, Alaska. It was called Catch 22. And at the time, I can't remember if MTV had launched or not by then, but Jeremy had this idea that he was going to do local VJs. And I remember going to this little office I walked in and I looked at this sort of operation, and I looked at my friend and I said, I think you ought to quit this job. There's no future working at this company, because, you know, it was just kind of hobbled together, but it went on to broadcast for some time, of course, until MTV kind of took over the landscape. And I really didn't brush up against Jeremy very much until later, in, I think it was the latter part of 1998, 1999. And there was a group of us kind of radio people that were in commercial broadcasting. Jeremy and Carol had KYES at the time, and Jeremy had gotten a license to put a low power TV station on in Anchorage as well, but it really wasn't doing anything, and it had been off the air for a while. And Jeremy figured out, as I would later come to learn through my affiliation with him, that he figured out that there was a loophole in the FCC regulations that would allow you to broadcast a low power TV station, that you could actually broadcast the sound and not necessarily broadcast the audio, or excuse me, the sound and not broadcast video at the same time. And we were all lamenting about being out of work and, you know, trying to compete against because the big commercial broadcasters, everybody kind of remembers that time in radio when they deregulated. And I remember I was working at a group of stations, and we went from having 3 stations in the building to having like 12 stations in the building, because we were LMA and NJSA, and it was just a kind of an odd time in radio here in Anchorage. And Jeremy had this idea. He said, well, why don't we put on a new radio station? And we looked around at each other and we said, well, because we don't have $500,000 to compete against these guys. And he said, no, we can do it this way. And so we believed him, and Jeremy really blazed this trail where we put on the first Channel 6 station in the country as a radio station, except that we also put a camera in the studio, and we were broadcasting the DJs in the studio at the same time, which was pretty groundbreaking. But the worst part about it was that in those days, DJs it was a rock and roll radio station. It was an alternative rock radio station. And when we launched it right at the end of 1999, and we can all remember the you remember the end of the world was going to come in 2000 because of the millennium. Nothing was going to work, and the whole world was going to stop. And so we called the station The End, because it was at the end of the dial at 87.7. And we had the brilliant idea, Jeremy, I think it was Jeremy that came up with the idea, to put guys in sandwich boards walking around on the corners of the city for 2 weeks before we launched the station with that looked like religious nuts, which was funny because Jeremy was not a very religious man, as we all know. And they were talking about the end is coming, the end is near, repent, listen to 87.7. It was really quite a great idea. And when we launched the station, of course, immediately the commercial broadcasters in the marketplace all filed complaints with the FCC. And some of you will recognize the name Chester Coleman. because he's quite infamous in broadcast, in some of the broadcasting circles, especially in California. Well, Chester filed a complaint and had his attorney file a complaint, and it said that we weren't broadcasting pictures along with our audio, and that was a violation. And the FCC was, pretty upset about the whole idea anyway. And so Jeremy had the brilliant idea, because we were broadcasting pictures, and he kind of got mad one day, and he called me up and he said, well, I think I fixed our problem. And I said, well, what did you do? He said, well, I took a camera up to the transmitter, and I turned off the studio, and I plugged in this camera, and I put Chester Coleman's the home phone number for Chester Coleman's attorney. And I said, if you see this number, call. Well, within about 12 hours, we got this call from this attorney that was pretty spitting mad, and it was hard to talk to him because there was a lot of swearing in between his call to me, because he had gotten hundreds of phone calls from listeners who saw his number on this white piece of paper that said, call if you can see this. And needless to say, the FCC complaint went away in Jeremy fashion, because they could no longer claim that we weren't broadcasting pictures with our audio, because he had gotten all the telephone calls from the people watching the pictures. And that was just one of the rather interesting experiences I had with Jeremy. But, Jeremy was probably one of the smartest guys I knew. And I heard that one of the previous folks talk about Jeremy being a MacGyver. And I'll never forget the time that we had an AM transmitter. That was, I don't know how old it was, but it was broken and it wouldn't work. And we had every engineer go up and look at it. And I was talking to Jeremy one time, and I said, Jeremy, nobody can fix this transmitter. I think I'm going to have to buy a new one. We're off the air. And I kind of challenged him, and he went up and he fixed the transmitter. And I don't know what he did, but he talked about a coat hanger, and that transmitter ran after he fixed it for probably 3 years, before we had to buy a new one. And it's just, he was an amazing guy. Certainly my time working with Jeremy and Carol at KYES had a major impact on my life and my family's life. And Carol talked about how people in Alaska looked at Jeremy, and occasionally people would talk about Jeremy as kind of a rogue and outside the box thinker, but I always thought of him as that guy from Back to the Future, where he just could fix anything. I mean, and he really taught me that there's really a solution for every problem. You just got to figure it out. And I'm sad that he's gone. I'm glad that I got to know him. He certainly made my life and my family's life and everybody I know better for knowing him. So I just want to say thanks for doing this. And it's just been great to hear all the stories, especially about things I just didn't know about Jeremy, because he never really talked about himself either. He was always more concerned about you and what he could do. And he just was a great guy. So he was a really, really a wonderful man. So thanks.
Very, very well said, Mike. Good job. Appreciate the thoughts there. And I'm going to take you out of the spotlight, and we're going to go to who's got an open mic here. Somebody has an open mic. Who has the open mic? Okay, fix that. And now we're going to get around to Gips again, but before that, we're going to go to Betsy Fox and Scott McMurran. So Betsy, unmute yourself and pick it up, and you're in Namibia. I don't know how to say Outjo, but I hope that's right. So you go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I don't know how to say it either, but it's usually Uchu, as most people say here, Uchu. I'm really from the U.S., but I've been living in Namibia for 35 years now. But anyway, I met Jeremy through Inika, and just because he was her boyfriend and then husband. So that's the only way I knew him. I never knew him in the radio world. So I didn't know all his brilliance with communications and radio and TV. But he was brilliant, and I enjoyed when they came here for a visit with me in Namibia. And we went around to some of the game reserves to see the animals, and so they could see part of Namibia. You know, we camped out wild a couple of nights, and Ineke hadn't done that before, and I didn't realize it. Anyway, that she was a bit nervous about the whole thing, to say the least. But they did fine, and it was so nice having them. And so that's the only context I knew Jeremy, besides being brilliant at home and KBOO. And yeah, really appreciated the short time that I did know him, and really miss him. And I know Ineke does, and I feel so sorry for her losing that major part of her life. So I send love to Jeremy's spirit and to Ineke. Thank you for the time. Bye.
Thank you, Betsy.
All right, thank you very much. And next we're going to go to Scott McMurrin in Anchorage, Alaska. Do you want to speak again, Scott?
Yeah, just briefly, I was great to see Mike Robbins testify about his time at the radio station and Channel 6 in the end. It reminded me that my first interface with Jeremy was at Catch 22, the low power TV station in Anchorage. It was revolutionary. I don't know really how we got hooked up together, but his sales manager and I ended up doing a bunch of travel promotions and had a great time. It was wonderful. He was wild and crazy. He fit right in Alaska. And then I mentioned earlier in the show here, the two. I mean, I didn't have much to do with radio, although I did have a radio show on that station, KOAN, that Mike Robbins co-hosted there. And we actually did a show from the garden there, which Ineke showed us there at the farm there outside of Cape Town. But it was wonderful, just kind of a random hookup in Hong Kong. My friends were out of town, so I took the ferry over to Macau. We spent the day. That's where I met Ineke. And then it was a couple years later that I went down to Cape Town, and Jeremy was my driver guide, and it was just fabulous. And I love hearing all the stories. I'm sorry I missed Carol's testimony. I had to get up and make coffee for my wife because that's what time it is here in Anchorage. And with that, I'll let the other speakers go. But it's just a great thank you, Ineke and Paul, for putting this together. It's a wonderful way to commemorate Jeremy's remarkable life.
I'm starting to think we might have to do a continuation show. We've got so many people waiting in the wings today. And because of the sheer size of this, we weren't able to get anyone in. But I'll talk to Ineke about that and see what she thinks. So we've got Judith Gibbs now. And Judith, is there any way you can show us your video and unmute at the same time there? And Judith actually has somebody else that wants to talk that's with her. There you go. Thank you. And the ball's in your court, Judith. Go ahead.
You give me the, yeah. Hi, I'm handing this over to David Grace, who met Jeremy when David was a teenager in St. Louis. So here.
Yeah, greetings. And let's see, I guess in 1969, KDNA was becoming very popular in our town. And I volunteered to go down there. I was only 15 years old. And started working on the switchboard. And then just as I was getting close to 16 years old, I was told that I'd be allowed to get a third-class provisional license with a broadcast endorsement. And I crawled down the stairs. Jeremy held his office was down in the basement at KDNA, and you had to go down some really steep stairs to get down there. And sure enough, he was the kind of the Wizard of Oz down there, and everybody respected him, and only went there if necessary. And it was he helped me fill out the forms for my broadcast endorsement. I remember doing that while I was still 15, and so he knew that I'd be able to get on the air my birthday, if it was done properly. So yeah, that was the start. And when KDNA went off the air in '74, of course, Double Helix got started, and there were attempts to get KDHX on the air, but it's still, by 1982, it still was not on the air. And it was really pissing me off. So I hitchhiked out to Denver to see Jeremy, and a lot of stories related to that. But in the long run, KDHX did come on the air, and I think he did some backroom maneuvering to help it actually get on the air, because it was really disappointing. St. Louis was without coverage for any number of years, and during the end of Nixon, the Ford years, the Carter years, the start of Reagan, and we could have really had an impact if KDHX had been on the air. And as I understand it, actually KDHX is having problems almost immediately upon Jeremy's death. KDHX is now rebroadcasting old shows. I'm not even sure if they're running any live shows right now. So if anyone has any influence in trying to make sure that that station does persevere. And finally, one of the things that during that interim time, I went out of my way to work in as many of the stations that Jeremy helped create, the WRFG, KOPN. Let's see, Jerry Green started the one up in Telluride, and he's got a whole batch of jazz records that I donated to KOPN. He was in KOPN at the time, and I gave him a good stack of Miles Davis and John Coltrane for the Telluride station. And I went out of my way to work as many of those stations as I could, during my lifetime in broadcasting. And I still call up radio talk shows and give them hell. And you can always hear me as David from San Francisco. And so if I owe it all to Jeremy, because if he hadn't had the courage enough to get KDNA started, I'd be just like some schlub in St. Louis working in the mud. Tip of the hat, Jeremy. Oh, I do have a hat tip somewhere. But yeah, we'll certainly miss you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Judith, and thank you. And Cammie Enslow, it's your turn. Unmute yourself. Gotta unmute.
I'm calling from.
You need to unmute, Cammie, and somebody has an open mic, so whoever has the open mic needs to mute.
I have an open mic.
Let me go back to mine.
Cammie, can you unmute yourself? All right, Cammie, we're going to come back to you, and I'm going to toss it over to Dale Kraus in Austin, Texas. Go ahead, Dale. And we'll get back to you, Cammie. We'll get back to you. Oh, you're unmuted. Okay, you go ahead and take it. Go ahead and take it, Cammie.
I thought the little red guy on the picture would work, but it didn't. But anyway, I met Jeremy in Seattle, and the way I did is I was married at 20 and a widow at 22,
And I was very unhappy because I had, you know, a little boy to take care of, and I was by myself. And I used to listen to KRAB, their Baroque show, and it was so inspirational to me, and it helped so much that I decided to go up to KRAB and donate some money. So I put the baby in the buggy. I was living on Green Lake and rolled him up to the station, KRAB, met Jeremy. Big life changer. We clicked, we hit it off, and we moved in together. And he decided to give me a little break. And so he took care of my little boy, Jason, while I went off on a trip. And then he called me and he said, well, man-child needs a mother, which probably meant he was tired of taking care of a little baby boy. And he said, we're going to go to St. Louis and start a radio station. So he put a Western Electric old transmitter, the kind that if anybody could fix, Jeremy could fix, in a truck and drove to St. Louis, and I met him there. And we started building the station. We were living in this wonderful old Victorian house, just a little block, Westminster Place, near the station. And we started building the station, and he showed me how to build microphone preamps. And so I was assembling those. And then the time came to install the antenna, and nobody was willing to climb the tower on top of the Continental building except me, because I wasn't scared of heights. So OSHA would be horrified, because I did have a clip, but I was kind of climbing up this triangular structure, putting my feet in the corners and then going up more. And when I finally got up there, I was able to clip on and drill the holes and put the antenna brackets on and stuff. But it was an adventure. And at the station, I did a show now and then and cooked food for people now and then. And really, it was quite a deal. And the thing I want to mention, because we talked about the basement, Jeremy was tired of people trying to break into the station, so he built a Jacob's ladder to catch anybody that came through the door. And unfortunately, he forgot it was there and he tripped over it himself. But I think he and electricity had a special relationship, because he used to test to see the transmitter was on by touching it. I mean, what an amazing man. And I am so grateful for the time I had with him. Eventually I left because it wasn't a really good place for a little kid to be. But I always have loved him, always will love him, and I'm so grateful he was part of my life. That's all.
Thank you so much, Cammie. If I ever build a tower for my ham radio, I'll know who to call. Thank you. All right, we're going to turn it over to Dale Kraus now. Dale Kraus, you unmute yourself. And Pete Tritish, you get ready, because we're going to call on you after Dale and try to get your unmuting together and your video together. But Dale, it's your turn. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I'm another one of those Seattle people that KRAB was an inspiration to me and my family. We lived in rural Washington State, and my dad got me to go over and volunteer at KRAB. I came face to face with Jeremy when I was asked to fix a dead mic. Stuck my head underneath the mixing board, and there was this maze of wiring that was way too intimidating. I decided I would break something if I got into Jeremy's wiring under the board. But I remember him. KRAB had a Collins transmitter, serial number 2, made in 1948, I believe. But they had the cleanest signal to noise ratio in Seattle. They measured it one time against some of the other classical music stations in Seattle, and so it was a testament to Jeremy's attention to engineering detail that they were that a lot of care went into building KRAB. That's all I have to say.
All right, thank you so much. And Dale, I'll have to look you up when next time I get down to Austin. Thanks so much. All right, we're going to go to Pete Tritish. And Pete, can you unmute and turn on your video?
I think I'm unmuted. Everyone hear me?
Yeah, we hear you. What do you have
Yeah,
video?
sorry about my
Pete?
video. The camera's busted, of course. This being a community radio computer, you know. Well, I'd just like to say, Jeremy Lansman, the first real radio engineer I met. I started a pirate station in the late 90s called Radio Mutiny. And after it got busted and, you know, we were starting a campaign to legalize a new round of community radio in the late 90s, Jeremy was, I would just have to say, the perfect mentor for me. You know, he was someone who, you know, obviously like too smart for high school, too smart to go the regular route. He was like someone who, I remember he told me, well, we all were pirate radio broadcasters. It's just that you guys thought you were right for being pirate broadcasters as opposed to just trying to get away with it like we did. And so he was like just the perfect person to like sort of take me through understanding the FCC, understanding how they operate, understanding not to think exactly about how to follow the rules, but how to like work your way around them. And the same way with engineering problems. He was, you know, really the person that helped me understand the nature of the adjacent channel protections, which was the main barrier to the low power FM service. And maybe not all of you know this, but he actually, he was in the habit of just applying for whatever radio licenses and TV licenses were available just in case they might be useful to him. And he had a low power TV license in Anchorage that was unusable basically for TV because of you know, interference to the picture. It was too close to something else to really cover very well. So when he heard how much trouble I was having with the incumbent broadcaster associations, including National Public Radio and the National Association of Broadcasters, claiming that our 100-watt signals would cause drastic interference all over the country, he decided to do a little bench test. He set up a radio transmitter and a TV transmitter, and he used, people might have heard of the band TV on the Radio. He used the fact that TV channel 6 is just, was 82 to 88 megahertz, and the audio cover was at 87.75. And that's how he started KZND. It was actually from our conversations where he was just trying to help me prove that the second adjacent channel protections that the broadcasters were insisting on were really practically unnecessary today. And he amused himself so much by doing so that he was like, oh, hell, I'll not just, you know, use this as an experiment, but I'll just throw a radio station on there. So it was just really typical of the way he looked at things and the way he solved problems and the way that he, you know, just sort of navigated through all the hurdles that there were for community broadcasting that really showed me how to do what I've ended up doing. If there's one thing I'm sad about is that he left Alaska before I started working there a lot. I've been working in the summers building translators for Rich and Susie McClear's station, KCAW. And I only wish that I'd gotten to Alaska a little sooner so that I could have overlapped with him there. I'll just finish with something. Jeremy came with me on a lot of station builds, including the ones in Cairo, and the very first station that I built, the first legit station in Deal, Maryland. And when Ben Cobb heard that Jeremy was going to come help us put that station on the air, he was like, Jeremy Lansman's coming. That's like saying Jimi Hendrix is going to come sit in and play guitar with your like garage band. This is amazing. Jeremy Lansman's helping you build your station. So, and it couldn't be more true. You know, he was an incredible inspiration. He helped, like a lot of people have said, he helped me put me on my course through life to do what I'm still doing today. So thanks so much.
All right, real good. We're going to go now to Mitchell Lieber, who's in, where are you located, Mitchell?
I have been raising. So when am I coming in?
So
okay,
Jeremy,
you got an open mic there. All right, Mitchell, go ahead. And then
right.
Whoever was speaking up, we'll go to them next.
Great. Jeremy was, a mentor and inspiration to many in community radio, countless people, and of course, including me, and was always encouraging. When I think of Jeremy, sometimes I think of the brilliant jazz musician Thelonious Monk's quote that a genius is the one who is most like themselves. And Jeremy was most like himself in so many wonderful ways. His ability to improvise technical solutions is legendary. Here's a brief story that shows another side of his technical knowledge and really the expanse and the foresight of it. Around 1976, Jeremy came to Chicago, where I live, for the National Association of Broadcasters Convention. And Jeremy invited me to join him to see one of the convention's technical demonstrations of what was then bleeding edge technology. And at that time, the way TV networks worked is that to connect to local stations, they were over special video phone lines. And some programs were actually physically shipped to stations on videotape or film. And the demo we attended was the use of a satellite to connect TV stations to the network. And up until that time, again, it's 1976, satellite communications was really something that the government used and that huge phone companies like AT&T and a little later MCI used. So this was quite something that it was going to be used for TV. And the demo was at Chicago's public TV station at WTTW. And the satellite dish was brought in and rested on a flatbed semi-trailer because it was 40 feet in diameter. It was huge. So we're there, and Jeremy goes and chats with the engineer at the demonstration about technical matters for a number of minutes. And Jeremy's idea was that satellite reception and transmission could be done with a dish just a few feet in diameter under conditions he was describing to the engineer. And after a bit of back and forth, the engineer doing the demo agreed and said Jeremy was right, that it could work with a small dish. Of course, home satellite TV with small dishes happened, but that was almost 20 years later. So, his technical ability really extended to that foresight, and he was way ahead of his time. And like all of you, I miss him very, very much.
All right, thank you very much. And we're going to go to the Longhouse, and let me see who's at raising their hand. Reinhardt at the Longhouse. I'm going to ask you to unmute and take the stage. Go ahead, Reinhardt.
Hello. My
We've got
name
Francis. Go ahead, Reinhardt. We're not getting audio from you.
Excuse me, I'm unmuted. I've been raising my hand since. I'm Giselle Yitamben. I'm in Grabao. I'm in Neke's friends. I traveled from Cameroon to come and wipe the tears of my friend here in Grabao. So, it's not easy to wipe that kind of tears because the loved one never teach us how to live without them. Jeremy is a generous genius and the husband of my dearest friend, and colleague Ineke Buskens. As soon as they get married, they came to Grabao. After that, I visit them. I met Jeremy, and since then, I've been meeting Jeremy one and a while. And I was amazed to learn that he was one of the pioneers of community radio. We talked extensively about this experience. He told me how, at an earlier age, he had been inclined to turn radios into transmitting stations. Together, we began exploring the possibility of setting up a community radio station in my village, Bache, in Cameroon. As budget constraints emerged as one of the biggest challenges, Jeremy actively sought various possibilities to establish a community radio station. According to him, it was possible to receive amplitude modulation radio without electricity. He explained that this technology is as old as itself. He had one when he was a child. It was a plastic device resembling a toy rocket with a short wire and an earphone. He would sneak into school, listen to local radio, and no one knew it. Afterwards, the couple left for work in Macau, China, and their plan to visit my village was no longer a priority. Although the community radio station in Bache was yet to be implemented, the groundwork is in place. Doing good and helping others seemed effortless for Jeremy. He always tried to find a way to help whenever I was in need. When my daughter was going through difficult time, he offered valuable advice based on his own experiences that turned out to be decisive. He had a way of conveying his messages that were both modest and humorous. Once my email box had been hacked, and messages that were sent out to people were not at all good. When he received his own, he simply told me, I just got one message. I suggest is not really from you, but is instead a virus. It is posted from a top. He explained technically why it is a virus. And he said some of your friends may be unhappy. He was so loving and deeply cared about others, always finding ways to help. 2 years ago, I visited Ineke and Jeremy again here in Grabao, and noticed that Jeremy looked frail. He confided in me that he had almost died, but chose not to follow that path because he didn't want to see Ineke suffer. So he came back. Every morning, Ineke prepared various beverages to boost his immune system and detox. One morning, this was celery juice. He visibly disliked it, but when he saw me drinking mine and encouraging him to join in, he looked at me with childlike eyes and asked, do you think this will show Ineke that I'm a real man? With Bob smiled, and he drank his beverage in a go. He was truly genius and caring. What did he not win this battle this time as he did the first time? Maybe a message for us all is that he is not gone. There is no death, that he will continue to support us. Thank you all. So, yes, thank you, Ineke, to be strong. We wish to see you strong. And thank you all to be at this celebration. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks for putting up those pictures from the Longhouse. And is there anyone else at the Longhouse who wants to speak now? I guess that's it. And we've got no one else raising their hand. So I will, okay.
Excuse me, we are several of us here to come back, you know.
Okay.
Thank you.
If no one's speaking, can I?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. I hope this isn't feedbacking. I can't tell. I'm Frances Henderson, and I live in North Monterey County. And I was married to one of the first DJs at KFAT and KPIG. So my stories of Jeremy go back 30 years, although I didn't meet him until more recently. And after I actually knew Jeremy's daughter, Elspeth, best. She lived, when I met my then husband, my now deceased husband, he lived in Laura and Elspeth's house. So Elsie and I got to be close. And maybe 5 years later, I had a Christmas party and Elsie brought Jeremy, who I had met before, but hadn't had any kind of time to get to know. And by that time he had met Innika. So Elsie, Innika, Jeremy, and their friend Petra from Sacramento came to my party. Innika, Petra, and I became fast, great girlfriends immediately, which resulted in me getting to know Jeremy much better. And I see what you have all talked about with the generous genius of Jeremy. Not only that, I just want to, he then came and stayed with me for a few, maybe a month towards the end, not the immediate end of his life, but after he was diagnosed with the illness. So he spent about, it seemed like weeks and weeks, but not long enough in my house while I was going to work and coming home and cooking. And Jeremy was so sweet. He was the sweetest, nicest person. Even when he was dealing with the prospect of a terminal illness, he was so kind and so loving. And probably what I'd like to leave you with, because I'm sitting in the living room where I would come home to him. He was just sitting here in the chair with a stack of old National Geographics next to him. And each time I came home, he had more facts to divulge. You know, he spent his whole time going through the stack of National Geographics. And I was so impressed with him. And then as a parting shot, before he went home to Innika in South Africa, he bought me an antenna. He was going to correct my video experience. So I was always grateful for that. And I was lucky enough to watch Innika and Jeremy get married. And I still try to be the communicator between Elspeth and his other and Jeremy and now his family. So I will miss him terribly. And I'm so pleased that you all had such a great friendship. Oh, and just in time, Robin Marks has called, who is a great friend of Jeremy, and many of you might know him. Let me see if the MacIver trick works. Robin, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Can you hear Robin? Can everyone hear Robin? Yes, Robin, you're speaking.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Yes, we're here. You're speaking now.
Excellent.
To the whole broadcast. You called just as I was speaking on the mic. So would you please tell us how you felt about Jeremy Lansman? This is Robin Marks.
I felt about him. He is one of my best friends.
Okay, can you share the experience? I know I'm putting you on the spot.
I guess so, in various sort of dribs and drabs, because that's kind of how it was.
Everybody's interested in hearing more about Jeremy's life. Is it okay with everyone? I can't see the gallery. Go ahead, Robin, if you have anything to say. If not, I'll turn it back over.
You're good. We can hear you and we can hear Robin. So just get your phone as close to your speaker as you can.
AR-15 tuner on Buena Vista Hill in San Francisco one day, and decided to call it up. I think there was a phone number somewhere. Somebody must have mentioned that over the air as the request line, and talked to, I think, first Laura, and then Laura put Jeremy on, and he said, "Why don't you come down here?" So I went down there that night, and we stayed up all night building something that would basically, remember pagers in those days? Digital pagers didn't exist. You had to, you got a page and you called in. Well, Jeremy had some arrangement with somebody who was inventing the first digital pager, and they wanted to put that on an SCA, on the KFAT transmitter. So we worked on that all night, and I think we actually got it to work for a couple test calls. That's how I first got to know those guys.
Well, Robin, we've heard these testimonials about Jeremy and his ability to make anything into a working piece of art in the transmission world. So we appreciate you calling just in time.
Jeremy was a wonderful fellow, and he was a very open, very friendly guy who was open to everybody, basically, and had an experimental nature.
Great, thank you.
Very
okay.
Good fellow, that Jeremy.
All right, we'll turn it back over.
All right, we're not going to turn it back over. We're going to keep you here, Francis, because I just got a message from Ineke, and she says that Giselle from the Cameroons is going to try to call you on your phone, so you can put her on speakerphone if she can get through to you. So we'll come back to you if she gets through, okay?
Okay, that's fine. I know Giselle also. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Yes, hi, Francis. Hi, Frances.
Hi, Giselle.
Yes, yes.
So
you
nice.
Remember,
So
I
nice
came
to. Of
yes,
course, I do.
Yes, and I want to thank you to see you on the Zoom, and Ineke is going to give me your contact number so that we can continue. As I said, I came from Cameroon to wipe her tears. I'm glad to see how many friends are online supporting her. And that's all what I can say. I've been, really blessed to see all of us just agree that Jeremy was a genius. No matter what he did with all his heart, a lot of loving. So we have, a genius of genius, eh?
A generous genius.
A generous genius. That's how I put it. Yes, that's how I put it. And many people have put it like that. He was really selfless. And anytime trying to help people is really a lost, Thank you.
Thank you, Giselle. Nice to hear from you.
This is Paul again, and I think, Francis, that we've squeezed everyone in. Unless anybody knows of anyone who didn't get a chance to speak, I think I'm going to put it back to the group here. Yes, you can. Go ahead.
Hey, is it working now? I guess so. I get a little feedback.
Yeah, you're good.
Hey, this is John Ido. I think this is just great. Thanks for doing this. I regret not getting to know Jeremy a lot better back at KDNA. His intelligence just was overwhelming and intimidating to me because I was below average. Somebody's got to be below average to make people above average. I never knew what to say around him. Yeah, and one Sunday night I was on the air and I came on at 8:15, which was right after a 15-minute Nazi program that we programmed. And before that was 2 hours of blues. And then I came on right after the Nazis and I screwed it up really bad one night. I miscued everything. The 2 albums I had set up and the cart machine was messed up. And I just fumbled it terribly. I finally got something to play, and then the phone rang, and it was Jeremy calling into the control room to calmly explain to me what to do when I did that again. I never did it again, but he was very nice and kind about the whole thing. A regular commercial announcer would have been fired probably. Well, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you, Jeremy, for everything.
We've got one more person, I think, in Judith Gibbs. She's got her hand raised.
Hello, Paul. I wanted to tell you that They have several testimonies which has been on that link that I was sent on the chat. Can you play at least some of those? Because we have friends who could not join but who have sent their testimonies. Can you play 2 or 3?
When we have a chance, David would like to add something.
Who's next?
Okay, I'm going to have David jump in again.
We're muted.
Oh.
All right, so Judith Gibbs has her hand raised, and I think the Longhouse folks want to say some more. So I'm going to turn it over to Judith, very brief, Judith, and then we'll go back to the Longhouse, okay?
Okay.
You're on. Good.
Yeah, here we go.
Yeah. Hey, this is David again. Because Jeremy had the start of much, many of his stations were down in the Santa Cruz area or southern, the peninsula. KSCO, the radio station down in Santa Cruz, just had an enormous FCC violation, and if anybody wanted to put in for the KSCO license, check out the Saturday special on February 2nd. And the owner of the station cusses me out. He fuck you. He says he says any number of different curse words and orders me off the station forever. And the owner of the station, the guy's owned the station for 40 years. And so just in tribute to Jeremy, if anybody wants to put in for the KSCO license, you might have a great opportunity. It is in the podcast for February 2nd of the Saturday special KSCO radio. All right, thank you. And tip a hat again to Jeremy.
I'm going to send it back to the Longhouse, and y'all, if we can get Eineke on there, great. If we can't, Reinhardt, let's let you make some closing thoughts. Unless anybody else has something, we'll let you wrap it up today, Reinhardt. So what are your thoughts about today, and wrap it up for us, okay?
Is it giving someone else an opportunity?
Yes, is the opportunity given to us here because to Ineke here. Hello? Yes, can you please come and say to the last word?
Yeah, y'all, the Longhouse has the stage. Go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you all for coming. I'm so sorry that so many people couldn't get on. I think it's really it was really a pity that this registration issue became a bottleneck. So I'm very sorry for that. So unfortunately, I won't be available next week. I also don't think that it's a good idea because I think the momentum will be gone. We were all coming together today to celebrate Jeremy. And it's not just a show for us. For us, it's a real remembrance. That is not something you can put on a repeat button. So, well, I thank you all. I think especially Paul for making that possible. Because when he approached me, I was just one crying mess. I wouldn't have been able to think straight on anything. Getting this together accelerated my own process of mourning and integrating. And I want to end with showing you Jeremy's photograph there. Our Jeremy, he will stay here forever with us. He was such a light to the world. He was a light to everybody he came into contact with. And for that, we are grateful, very grateful. And everything is temporal. And I knew when I married Jeremy that we may have had very little time, but we made every moment count. And maybe that is something we all can take with us into the future, to make every moment count. Because you don't know when it's going to be the last. But I mean, that's not a sad thing. You know. Love you all. Bye-bye.
All right, everybody can unmute their microphones now, and let's give Annie K and everyone a round of applause. Everybody unmute. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming today. It's been a very emotional day. It's been wonderful. Anybody can say anything now. Just unmute and say whatever you want to say. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Freedom of speech.
Thanks, say it again.
Good word. Freedom of speech. Thank you, Jeremy.
Stay radioactive.